You ever look at your own child and wonder if they even see you? Not the version of you they need, the one who cooks, cleans, pays the light bill, and never complains, not the ghost who fades into the wallpaper so their life can shine brighter. I mean you, the woman who stayed up nights holding a feverish forehead dot, who walked 3 miles in snow just to get milk for their cereal, who sold her wedding ring not for herself, but so her son could have shoes that didn't leak when it rained. I used to think love was enough dot, that if I just gave more, stayed quiet longer, smiled through the hurt, they'd remember. But love don't always stick. Sometimes it just evaporates. Like morning fog over the Kanawha River. My name's Grace Morgan. I'm 74 years old. I was born and raised right here in Charleston, West Virginia, down past the old coal yards, where the air used to smell like sulfur and sweat, and folks measured kindness not in words, but in who showed up with a pot of beans when your stove broke. And if you're still listening, thank you. Most folks don't. They hear old woman and tune out, but you stayed. So I'll tell you what happened. Not for pity, not for revenge. Just so someone knows the truth before I'm gone, because the truth matters even when it hurts. You see, I raised my daughter and my son with nothing but grit, grace, and a whole lot of prayers whispered into pillowcases. I carried them through winters so cold the pipes froze solid and we slept in our coats, huddled under every blanket we owned. I worked too. Sometimes 3 jobs, cleaning houses by day, folding laundry at the hospital by night, taking in sewing on weekends just so they could wear clean clothes to school and never hear the word charity. And when they finally made it, when they stood tall in designer suits and heels, talking about networking, and roy-like they invented the words, they looked at me and called me a burden. A burden. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, she must have done something wrong, or maybe kids these days got no respect. But it ain't that simple. Life ain't a movie where the bad guy wears a black hat. Sometimes the cruelest things are said with a sigh, not a shout, with a shrug. Not a slap. I learned that the hard way. Let me tell you something I figured out after 40 years of loving people who only loved what I could give them. Blood don't always mean bond. You can share DNA, share a roof, share a name, but if you don't share respect, it's all just paperwork. And loyalty. Loyalty's a luxury some folks can't afford once they get a taste of comfort. It didn't happen overnight. Oh no. It crept in slow like mold in a damp basement. First, it was little things. A birthday call that never came. A Christmas card with a generic signature. Love. Emma and Daniel, like I was a distant aunt. Not the woman who changed their diapers and kissed their skinned knees. Then came the comments, Mom, why do you still wear that old coat? It's from the 90s. You really gonna tell that story again? Nobody cares about the mine days. Can you not mention how poor we were? It's embarrassing. I just smile and say, all right, honey, and let it go, because what's a mother supposed to do? Say, I gave you my life, now give me back 5 minutes of your time. That ain't how it works. Not in this world. Not when your kids think success means forgetting where you came from. But the real gut punch, it came on a Sunday afternoon just after church. When the sun was warm and the magnolias were blooming, we were sitting at the table, me, Emma, Daniel, and his wife, Lisa. They'd just moved into that big new house on McCorkle Avenue, the one with the stone columns and the fancy mailbox, the one built on my land. I'd signed it over to them 2 years ago, not because I had to, but because Emma cried and said, Mom, this is our only chance to start something real. And Daniel promised, you'll always have a home with us, your family. So I signed with a shaky hand and a hopeful heart that Sunday. I brought over a peach cobbler, my mama's recipe. The one I used to make when they were kids and scraped their knees or failed a test. I set it on the table. And Emma barely glanced at it. Then, over coffee. Daniel cleared his throat and said, real calm-like, Mom, we've been talking and we can't keep you here anymore. I froze. My spoon clinked against the cup. Emma jumped in, voice tight. It's not personal, Mom. The business is growing. We've got investors coming by. High-end clients. They expect a certain image. An image like I was a smudge on their polished glass door. I looked at my own flesh and blood and asked, real quiet, so, what am I supposed to do? Lisa, sweet thing that she is, reached for my hand. We'll help you find a place, Grace Morgan. A nice senior apartment. We'll even pay the first few months. I pulled my hand back, not angry, just hollow. Because in that moment, I saw it all clear as creek water. They didn't see me as their mother. They saw me as a liability, a reminder of the dirt they thought they'd scrubbed off. And maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't fit. I still wore my hair in a bun. I still schedule. I still saved rubber bands and reused grocery bags. I still remembered when $1 meant a loaf of bread. Not a latte, but here's the thing they forgot, that dirt they ran from. It's what grew them. My husband, Richard, he died in 2001, pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, left me with a 16-year-old daughter who wanted to be a businesswoman, and a 14-year-old son who dreamed of building houses and a mortgage I couldn't pay, but I didn't fold. I sold Richard's truck, the one he'd babied for 20 years. I took in laundry from half the neighborhood. I walked to the Piggly Wiggly with a list and a prayer, counting every penny like it was gold. Emma got into college on a partial scholarship, but books cost extra. So I stayed up nights doing data entry on this old clunker of a computer. Fingers stiff from cleaning chemicals, just to buy her textbooks. Daniel wanted to go to trade school. Tuition was $8,000. I took out a loan against the land, my land. The only thing Richard and I ever truly owned, and paid it in full. They never knew. I made sure of that, because I didn't want them carrying guilt. I wanted them carrying hope. And for a while, it worked. Emma graduated top of her class. Daniel got his real estate license before he was 22. They'd call me, excited, Mom, I got a promotion. Mom, I closed my first big deal. And I'd cry happy tears into the dishwater, thinking, this is it. This is why I did it all. Then came the day they came to me with a plan. We're starting a real estate firm. Mom, Hanson Properties, and we want to build the office right here on your land. I didn't hesitate. I called my lawyer the next morning, signed everything over, even threw in the old barn, said they could turn it into a client lounge or whatever fancy thing they wanted. I thought, now they'll never forget me. I'm part of their dream, but dreams change, people change, and sometimes love ain't enough to hold them after they told me to leave. I went home to my little room in the back of their house, the one with the single window that looked out at the oak tree Richard planted. When Emma was born, I sat on the edge of that narrow bed and asked myself one question, Grace Morgan, when did you become invisible? Was it when I stopped buying new clothes? When I started saying bless your heart instead of arguing? When I learned to eat last, speak least, and disappear when company came? I didn't cry that night. Grief like that, it don't come with tears. It comes with silence, with a kind of quiet rage that settles in your bones and whispers, enough, because here's another truth I learned the hard way. You can't pour from an empty cup. And mine had been dry for years. So the next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Mr. Carson, my lawyer since Richard passed. And I said, real calm, I want to sell everything. The land, the cabin, the acreage by the creek. All of it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Grace Morgan, you sure? That's all you've got. I looked out the window at the oak tree, its leaves trembling in the wind, and said, no, Mr. Carlson, that's all they've got. And I'm done being their foundation. Now, I know what you're thinking. She's gonna fight back. She's gonna ruin them, but that ain't me. I ain't cruel. I just ain't a fool anymore. You see, in these hills, we got a saying, don't curse the darkness, light a candle, so I lit mine. Not with fire, but with dignity. I packed what little I owned to suitcases, a photo album, Richard's old pocket watch, and I left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't leave a note. Just walked out like I was going to the store. And never came back. They called the next day. And the day after. And the day after that. But I didn't answer. Because some silences. They speak louder than words. And if you're wondering what happened next, how they found out the land was gone, how their fancy offers suddenly had no ground to stand on, you'll have to wait. Because this is just the beginning. But I'll tell you this much, walking away wasn't the end. It was the first time in 40 years I felt free. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not hurting them, but healing myself. So thank you for listening, for letting an old woman tell her truth without judgment. Because in a world that forgets mothers like me, being heard is its own kind of miracle. Now, let me take you back. Back to 2001, back to the day my world ended. And I had to learn how to build a new one with nothing but two scared kids and a heart too stubborn to break. You know, people think revenge is loud. They think it's shouting, slamming doors, burning bridges. But the truest kind of justice? It's quiet. It's calm. It's the kind that don't need an audience because it's not about hurting them. It's about finally freeing yourself. Last time I left off, I just walked out of that big, shiny house on McCorkle Avenue, the one built on my land, filled with my children's voices. But empty of my name. I had two suitcases, a heart full of ghosts, and $87 in my purse. Not much, by most folks' standards. But for the first time in years, I owned myself again, and if you're still here with me, listening to an old woman's truth, thank you. Because what happened next, it ain't pretty, but it's real. And real is all I've got left to give. The morning after I left, I didn't go to a shelter, didn't call a friend, didn't even cry. I went straight to Mr. Carlson's office, same lawyer who handled Richard's will. Same man who'd watched me sign away my land with hope in my eyes. He took one look at me, hair messy, coat too thin for October, and poured me a cup of coffee without saying a word. Then he sat down, folded his hands, and said, "You ready to do this, Grace Morgan?" I nodded. "I ain't doing it to hurt him, Mr. Carlson. I'm doing it so they finally see what they threw away." He didn't argue. Just pulled out the papers. Turns out, even though I'd signed the deed over to Emma and Daniel, I'd kept a life estate. A little clause Richard insisted on back in '98 said, no matter what, you got a right to live on that land till you pass. Smart man, my Richard. Knew the world better than I did. But here's the thing about a life estate. You can't sell the land yourself. But you can release your interest. And once you do, the whole property's free and clear for sale, for transfer, for whatever the new owners want. So I signed the release. Then I signed the listing agreement with a realtor I'd never met, a woman named Darla, tough as nails, raised in Logan County, knew the value of dirt in these hills. 2 weeks later, the land sold. Cash offer. No contingencies. Some developer from Ohio wanted to build luxury eco cabins for city folks who think camping means Wi-Fi and a minibar. When Darla handed me the check, I almost dropped it. 6 figures. For dirt, trees, and memories. Funny how the world works. What's priceless to you is just inventory to someone else. I didn't celebrate. Didn't buy a new dress or go out to eat. I went to the bank, opened a new account, just my name on it, and then I rented a one-room apartment above a laundromat on Washington Street. $650 a month. Peeling paint, thin walls, but a window that faced east so I could watch the sun rise. And every morning since, I've sat by that window with my coffee, watching the light climb over the hills. And I breathe, just. Breathe. Now, you might be wondering, did they find out? Oh, they found out all right. It was a Tuesday. I was folding laundry, still to my own, even at 74 when my phone rang. Unknown number. But I knew. That tightness in my chest. That's a mother's intuition. You never lose it, no matter how much they try to bury it. I let it ring. Then again. And again. By the 5th call, I turned the phone off. Not out of spite, but because I finally understood something. You can't reason with people who only hear what serves them. 2 days later, a letter came. Not email, not text. A real paper letter on fancy letterhead, signed by some lawyer I'd never heard of. It said my kids were shocked and distressed to learn the property had been sold. That their business Hansen Properties was now operating on land they no longer owned. That they had 30 days to vacate or face legal action. I read it once. Then I tucked it into the back of my Bible right between Psalms and Proverbs, where I keep things that need praying over. Because here's another truth I learned the hard way. Guilt don't change people. Only consequence does. And honey, consequence had just knocked on their door, wearing a suit and carrying a clipboard. They didn't give up easy. Oh no, first came the calls, dozens of them. Emma crying, Daniel yelling, Lisa begging, Grace Morgan, please. Just talk to us. We'll fix this. We'll buy you a house. Don't do this to us, Mom. But I stayed silent. Because silence is the loudest language a betrayed mother knows. Then they showed up at the laundromat. I saw them through the window, Emma in her designer coat, Daniel in a suit wrinkled from driving to fast. They stood there, looking up at my window like lost children. Part of me wanted to open it. To yell, to cry, to ask why. One more time. But the wiser part, the part that finally learned to protect itself, just pulled the curtain closed, because I remembered something my mama used to say, if you feed a dog long enough, it'll still bite your hand if it thinks there's meat on it. And my kids, they weren't hungry anymore, but they still wanted my bones. Weeks passed. I heard things, of course. Small towns like Charleston. News travels faster than gossip at a church potluck. Turns out their luxury office got shut down. Clients backed out. Investors pulled funding. Their fancy sign got taken down in the rain. And through it all, I kept living. I joined the senior center on Lee Street just for the coffee and crossword puzzles, not the company. I started volunteering at the food pantry twice a week, packing boxes for folks who reminded me of my younger self. And every Sunday, I'd walk down to the river, sit on that old bench near the bridge, and talk to Richard. You were right, honey, I'd say. Love ain't always enough. Sometimes you gotta love yourself first. It sounds selfish, don't it? But here's the thing they don't teach you in Sunday school. Self-preservation ain't sin. It's survival, and after a lifetime of giving everything away, I finally learned to keep something for myself. One afternoon, I got a call from Darla the realtor. Grace Morgan, she said, voice low, they're trying to buy the land back. Offered 20% over market. Said it's family legacy. I almost laughed. Family legacy. Funny how that phrase only matters when you're about to lose it. I told her, tell him no. Not for double. Not for triple. Some things ain't for sale, especially when they were never truly given, because that's the bitter pill, ain't it? They thought because I gave it freely, it had no value. But the truth is, the things we give from love are the most valuable of all. And you don't get to throw them away like yesterday's trash. Now, I won't lie, there were nights I cried. Nights I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd done the right thing. If maybe I should have just stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed useful. But then I'd remember the day they called me a burden. The way Emma looked at my hands rough from work and wrinkled her nose. The way Daniel said image like it was more important than blood. And I'd whisper to myself, you deserved better, Grace Morgan. And it's never too late to claim it, in these hills. We got another saying, a tree don't grow straight if the roots are rotten. Well, my roots were good, solid, deep. It was the branches that grew crooked. And sometimes, you gotta prune 'em to save the whole tree. So here I am. Living in a tiny apartment with thin walls and a leaky faucet, eating beans and cornbread most nights, wearing the same coat for 10 winters. But my soul's lighter than it's been in decades. And if you're sitting there thinking, but she's alone. Yeah, I am. But loneliness ain't the same as being lost. I know who I am now. Not mom, not burden, just Grace Morgan, a woman who loved too hard, gave too much, and finally learned to draw a line in the dirt and stand on the right side of it, and that's worth more than any mansion on McCorkle Avenue. So thank you for staying with me through this part of the story, because what comes next, it's not what you think. It's softer, sadder, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit like Grace, but that's for another time. For now, I'll leave you with this. Don't let anyone make you feel small for taking up space in your own life. You earned it. Every inch. And if you ever doubt that, just remember an old woman from Charleston who finally said, enough, asterisk. You ever notice how silence can be louder than shouting? How a single no can echo longer than 100 promises? I used to think forgiveness meant taking someone back into your life. But I've learned better since. Forgiveness. It's not about opening your door. It's about unlocking your own heart so the bitterness don't poison you from the inside out. It's been 2 years since I left that house on McCorkle. 2 winters. 2 springs. 2 birthdays I spent alone, eating pie from the diner and watching the river roll by. I got used to the quiet, even started liking it, because in the stillness I finally heard my own voice again, and then they came, not with lawyers this time, not with offers or excuses, just to people my Emma and my Daniel standing on the sidewalk below my apartment, looking up like they'd lost their way home. I saw them through the curtain. Emma's hair was shorter, her coat plain. Daniel's shoulders were slumped, like the weight of the world had finally settled where it belonged. They didn't look like the polished business owners from the brochures. They looked like my babies again, scared, tired, and small. My hand shook when I heard the knock. Not from fear, from memory. Because a mother's heart never really forgets how to love even when it's been bruised raw. I opened the door just a crack. Didn't say a word. Emma's eyes filled right up. Mom, she whispered, voice breaking like thin ice. We're so sorry. Daniel couldn't even look at me. Just stared at his shoes, the same kind I used to patch with duct tape when he was 10. We lost the business, he said. The house. It's in foreclosure. We're renting a little place near St. Albans, just. Starting over. I didn't invite them in. But I didn't shut the door either. They stood there in the hallway, spilling out everything they'd buried for years, how they'd been ashamed of their roots, how they thought success meant leaving the past behind. How they only realized what they'd thrown away. When it was gone, Emma reached into her bag and pulled out an old photo me, holding baby Daniel, standing in front of that oak tree. I found this in a box, she said, tears falling now. I forgot. You used to sing to us while you washed dishes. You saved every report card. You walked in the rain just to bring me soup when I was sick in college. Her voice cracked. We were so stupid, Mom, we thought we were building something new. But we tore down the only thing that was real. I looked at them, really looked. Not as the people who called me a burden, but as the children I'd rocked through thunderstorms and scraped knees and first heartbreaks. And right then, I felt it, not anger. Not even sadness, just peace, because here's a truth I learned the hard way. Sitting alone in this little room for 2 years, you can't unlove your children. But you can choose not to let them hurt you again. So I took a breath and said what I needed to say, not what they wanted to hear. I forgive you, I told them, voice steady as river stone. With all my heart, I do. But I can't live with you again. My heart's too old to break a second time. Emma started to protest, but I held up my hand. You don't get to decide when I'm safe to frown. You made your choice, and I made mine. Forgiving you don't mean I have to trust you with my peace. Daniel finally looked up, eyes red. We want you in our lives, Mom. We've got a little place. It's not much, but there's a room. For you, I smiled, then a real one, soft and sad. I appreciate that, son, truly, but my home is here now. And my peace. That's worth more than any room in any house. I reached out and touched Emma's cheek just once. You go build your life. Do better, be kinder. And when you have kids of your own, remember, love ain't measured in square footage or bank accounts. It's measured in who shows up when the lights go out. They cried then right there in the hallway. And I let them. Because sometimes grief is the price of waking up. When they left, I closed the door slow. Didn't lock it out of spite, just because it was time. Later that night, I sat by my window, the one that faces east, and watched the moon rise over the hills. And I whispered to Richard, like I do every night, we raised them the best we could, honey. Now it's on them to grow. People say old age is about letting go. But I think it's really about holding on to your dignity, to your truth, to the quiet knowledge that you did your best with what you had. And if you're still listening, thank you. Because this old woman's truth, it's not about revenge. It's about grace, the kind that says, I release you, so I can finally be free. In these hills, we got a saying, a bent tree can still bear fruit, just not for those who broke its branches. And that's all right, because my fruit now, it goes to the food pantry, to the lonely widow down the hall, to the stray cat I feed on my fire escape. I may be alone, but I'm not empty. And that, my friend, is the richest kind of full.